So welcome along to the Real Circularity, our online micro forums. We'll be doing these every few weeks, which will be sharing and showcasing our work in our academy, our consultancy, and our coaching business. And first, I'm going to get the legend to introduce himself, Ken Alston.
Well, thanks, Rachel. I'm happy to be here working with you. I've been a long time in this sustainability and circular economy journey. First of all, working in industry myself in a global multinational corporation, and being one of the very earliest people to work on sustainability. And I actually was probably one of the first people, if not the first person, to put the word sustainable in my job title. And for 8 years, I ran the early sustainability program for SC Johnson & Son. That's what brought me from Europe over here into the US. And then later, when I hit some walls in the implementation of sustainability, I hired a consultancy. And I chose to work with Bill McDonough and Michael Braungart, Dr. Michael Braungart, who are the co-authors of the seminal book on this topic, Cradle to Cradle. And I worked with them for 17 years as Bill's chief of staff and also as the CEO of their consulting firm here in Charlottesville, where I still live. And then later I went independent, and now we're working together, Rachel. And so I'm happy to be here talking about what we now call real circularity.
Yeah, loving it. I really love working with you, Ken. You are a legend in the space. Yeah, so my name's Rachel Sheila Khan. I've been in the design and design management part of the fashion industry for over 2 decades. I moved into sustainability over the last 10 years. Very much self-taught, but yeah, that's not a bad thing, I don't think. I'm a lecturer on sustainability and ethics in business. I'm founder of Circular Earth and something called the Ecosystem Incubator, which is a collaborative where we have businesses that start to come together to co-create. I also worked into working in regenerative sector, not just in the procurement of items and the growing space and things like that, but also in the way that businesses are fundamentally created and the way that businesses can come together, co-create, and so on and so forth. And we came together on Real Circularity because we found a real synergy between the kind of things that I was talking about in the regenerative space to the kind of things that Ken had seen over the years in circularity. And in fact, some of the original documents and books on the subject, which were the foundations of Cradle to Cradle, were really touching on a lot of the regenerative work anyway. So yeah, so there you go, that's us. And what we're going to talk about today is Trend Radar. And Ken, this is something that you kind of started with back in the day as well.
Yeah, it could be as many as 20 years ago when I first used this. I've been using this in presentations for literally for decades. And it came from the idea that, all of these different issues that we can include in this big general topic of sustainability and now the circular economy, it's so multifaceted, so many different elements that apply to a greater or lesser degree depending on where you are and which company you're in, what industry you're in. These things move, they're not static. This was one of the first revelations I had, was it's not like you're plotting a chart and then there you are, I've plotted my situation and I don't have to think about it again. This is constantly on the move. So depending on what your business is, where you are, different topics will have different degrees of relevance and importance to you and your business at any one time. And this changes over time, and these changes can be slow, they can be fast. And you need to have a sense of this movement. If you don't have a sense of the movement around all of these topics, then you're going to get caught out. And this is the risk side of the equation. And so this is trying to help you avoid the downsides of risk of something coming up as a surprise and blindsiding you, and suddenly you're in a reactive mode And when you're in a reactive mode, reacting to an issue, it's going to cost you more money because you're not prepared for it. You're having to act there and then in the moment, and you're scrambling to try and fix something that if you'd been able to predict it a little bit more in a little more timely fashion, then you'd be able to, move yourself into a position where you're ready for whatever it is that's coming at you. And so this radar chart was really thinking of yourself in the center of the dial here, and thinking of the airline industry and planes flying across the skies, and the radar sweep goes round once every so many seconds, and you have a sense of the movement of the planes. Are they coming nearer to you or further away from you? Are they coming together? Are they coming apart? And you've got a sense of where these things are and where they're moving to. And so the idea was to take the issues that are most relevant to you and your business and your locality and plot them on a chart, but with a sense that they have momentum and a movement and a direction. And so something like you have EPR, extended producer responsibility, right close to the center. That's something that is of the moment to you, and you're dealing with it. If it's in that inner zone, you've internalized this issue and you're dealing with it. Some of these other things that are further out, like toxins and locality, new business models, these are further out from your center, and so you've got time to position yourself, but you've got to watch them, and you've got to come back and look at this at some frequency, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever right for you and your type of business, and see where the trend is going. Which is why it's a trend radar. It's like, it may be that the toxicity of materials might be something that's of some interest to your business and that you're working in, but it may not be the most important thing for you right now. But suddenly Greenpeace comes out with a report on toxins in children's clothing, and there you are. If you're in the children's clothing business, suddenly in a moment that now is front and center on your radar. And if you hadn't had some awareness that toxicity and materials was something that you ought to have some awareness and knowledge in, then you're going to get caught out by it. And so the idea is to plot all the different things, and this is, as you know, Rachel, this is one of the things we do in the academy, is we have students plot their own trend radar to get a sense of where they are and what's moving, what's changing.
Yeah, and that's going to be different depending on what brand you're in. A lot of our academy members are either inside large brands or they're consultants themselves, where that's located, what specialism it's in, et cetera, et cetera. So this radar here is a larger generic one of what we're seeing coming through as the main sort of 5 trends. This can change for us within the next 2 or 3 weeks, right? Like new economics actually is becoming much more of a conversation for us, right? So for each person and each business, it's going to be different. So we also work with businesses in this way and have them make sure that they're at the forefront of what's being talked about, of the next thing that's coming through. And they can then be proactive rather than reactive. If we know that toxins or new economics is going to be something that they might need to start at least engaging in a small way, then by the time it pops up in the middle, then they can be ready to go, right? So I think that's having the awareness that it's there, like a radar system. So first, we're going to confront the elephant in the room, which is the new economics side of things. And we like to do this very much so in our work, right? To actually get that we have to reduce overproduction and work with fashion items, or it could be any other item, right? In a very different way, but particularly fashion as well, because it's something that has become throwaway. And we need to elongate the use span of that item whilst also staying in business. And we often say, oops, someone's trying to come in. We often say, how do we stay in business while reinventing that business? And maybe Ken, you can speak to that part of this a little bit as well.
Yeah, and this is obviously again different depending if you're an existing business or if you're a startup business. So Athena, you were talking about, you've got companies that are in early stage startup. Well, if you're in startup, you've got no pre-existing business, you've got no pre-existing model. And so in those cases, you can start with trying to integrate as many of these new circular practices as you possibly can, right from the get-go. And you've no legacy systems, you've nothing holding you back from starting the way you really want to be. If you're in an existing business that's operating in the linear economy, then you've got a more difficult job because you've got so many fixed points. You've already designed your product, you've already got your manufacturing, you've already got your distribution systems and your sales systems, and you're selling stuff today in a linear fashion. And you've got to have a plan by which you can, over time, move your systems from being linear to becoming more and more circular as fast as you physically can, within the bounds of your business and making the returns you want, and also within the allowance that your clients are going to, your customers are going to allow you to change things in a way that's not going to put them at risk. So you've got to be risk averse when you're making these changes. But the changes do need to be made. And so you're going to have to find the right pathway to progressively, product by product, brand by brand, begin to integrate some of, again, these new models into your existing business. And it's a little bit experimental, right? Because you don't want to go too far, too fast. You don't want to change something and then have the whole thing fall apart on you. Therefore, your business disappears. You've got to do this in a very controlled way, testing the market, finding the people who are open to these changes, and then moving into this and creating, in some cases, this space for the circularity to come to the fore.
I think we can do that inside of a large business and create these agile trials, I suppose. But we're also doing that on the other side, where we co-create decentralized systems and do that in a very small micro way to show that that system is indeed possible inside of a larger system, right? So very much the decentralized systems approach, looking at relocalized economies, which is talked about in the very early books that are on the subject, looking at how we do not always extract from different economies, particularly those in the global south, etc., and how we rebalance the way that actual economies are throughout the world. And I get that a business can't do that just on their own, or a micro business can't do that just on their own. It's about everyone moving towards these things, creating new value, continuous value from one particular thing. So instead of it just being about just the product, it could be about the product's life use span. It could be about the complementary offers that you create around that, for instance. So we do a lot in dynamics of how you can create different revenue streams instead of just relying on selling a hell of a lot of product to create these economics, right? So that's moves into identifying new revenue streams, this agile approach to transition. For us, we do a lot of bottom-up creation in our incubator as well, so to show that actually you can work from the seed and really then know the transparency of the product very easily, without then having a top-down approach where you're kind of like trying to pick through all of the mess of the supply chains, etc. So there is a really great sort of transparency piece on working in the bottom-up way. And of course, AI and crypto can be a huge part of this as well, and we're working into some of that. Then we have EPR, our next trend, which doesn't need to be a headache, like our website here, whatisepr.com. And of course, this is going to be, again, different for different countries. If you're selling into the EU right now, even if you're making in a different country, or if your head office is in the UK, etc., for instance, if you are selling into the EU, you're going to find this to be a problem over the years, right? So there's going to be digital product passports that would be enforced on brands. there's going to be potential fines that brands will have to take account for their linear product. So this is a massive thing that's coming. And yeah, one that is in the middle of our radar at the moment, just because we are close to the EU here. Doesn't mean to say that this is not going to come in for any other place as well, because it will, we think, over time become a priority for other countries.
Well, that's where the locality part comes in, Rachel, right? Because I was talking to someone, we both know this morning.
Yes.
This person's in France, and the conversation was about there's sort of a good news, bad news story. The good news is that ERP and things like it are coming into the EU legislation. The bad thing is that there's no enforcement yet, right? And so on the one hand, on the radar, you can see that's come closer to you. You have to pay attention to it, but it may not have come right into the center yet for, in some locations, because the government hasn't yet moved into the penalty phase, as it were, where when they find you're not following through on the regulations that they fine you. But if you don't even realize that that's an issue, if it wasn't on your radar, then you will be caught out at whatever level.
100%. Then we have our tracking toxins, and Ken has the chemistry background, not me. However, I've been working on a project to track the toxins in nature itself, because sometimes there are toxins in the actual natural dyes and things like that. So toxins has become a talking point recently, especially with the book coming out from Alden Wicker, To Die For, where we're talking about the toxins actually harming the human body from clothing. Right? We think, well, clothing doesn't kill us. Well, sometimes it creates huge health problems. So this is one of the trending topics that we are working into in our research as well.
Well, even if you go back 10, 15 years, Rachel, Greenpeace came out with reports on toxins in clothing. The little monster in your, I forget the full title. It was like the little monster in your home, which is about children's clothing and toxins. And so these are not, in a way, they're not new issues. They're resurfacing. But again, to the topic of the trend radar, that's been out there on the periphery for some time, raised by Greenpeace, and now it's coming further and further in as other things, pique the interest.
Yeah, and we call it tracking toxins because it's not just about the creation of the first product, and especially in circularity, it's when you put it into the next use, next remake, next the deconstruction and remake of something else. You're going to
you shouldn't have given me the toxin in the first place, and now you're doing a wonderful thing and following the circular economy, and now you're giving me a second and third time.
Yeah. For instance, my father used to be an upholsterer. So back in the 70s and 80s, when they moved a lot of the fabrications into synthetics and applied fire retardants and stuff, because they figured out that they caught fire very quickly, he was actually ripping out like a lot of chemically laden items, right? And I can't prove it, right? But he's actually now in a home and has Parkinson's disease, right? So it'd be very hard for me to prove that that's what's happens. But when someone is remaking stuff, they are inhaling the toxins that are being released from these items. And even in our home, things are off-gassing as well, right? I learned this term via Ken. There's actual off-gases as things just sit in our home or are heated up or whatever. So yeah, so big thing.
This is the idea of when you buy a new car, right? And you get in and say, oh, look, that's the new car smell. And you talk about it as if it's a good thing. Well, what is it? What is it that you're smelling? Well, it's the off-gassing of the chemicals from the plastics that are inside the vehicle. And it's not a good thing. People create air fresheners for cars which try to mimic the new car smell. It's a crazy world we live in.
It really is. Hey. And then local is one of our favorite things, right? So of course, we have global creation. And we're probably not going to get rid of that for a very long time, right? And there's always going to be a hybrid, even if we do decentralize the way that we actually produce things, right? But if we made something in China and brought it over to here, then...
Yeah, and I think there's the old statement, right?
Oh, you were talking a bit
You,
faster.
you went quiet on us for a second. Sorry, I jumped in.
That's okay. I think it's my go ahead, you jump in.
Well, yeah, you were about to say about China.
Yes.
I say that, in my apartment here, I have a washing machine that was probably made, in China for my laundry. In a way that it matters, in a way that obviously it came a long way. It had to travel a long distance. And so there's a lot of travel miles, therefore a lot of, embodied carbon from all that travel. But on another hand, the old saying was all sustainability is local. Ultimately, it's all local because now that washing machine is right here where I am in my apartment. And so what happens when it's no longer functional is a local issue. And so in a way, you could say, well, let's open our arms and say, well, thank you, China, for giving me so many kilograms of aluminum and steel and, whatever else is in that washing machine. But now what can we do with it here? If it's not designed in a way that the parts are reusable in some way, even with some transformation of the material, then we're not creating that continuous value that is behind the idea of material flows in the circular economy. And Sathini, in Africa, where you are, you end up getting a lot of things that the developed world don't want, right? Just because it's become like with the fashion, you get a lot of old clothing. And so in a way, you ought to be able to look at that and say, well, that's a good thing because now I've got a resource, I've got a material that I didn't have before. But on the other hand, what is it that you're getting? If you're getting materials that have toxins in them, or if you're getting materials that can't be reutilized and repurposed, then that added value isn't there for you to get. So it's difficult for you to have that added value and make use of it locally, which is what you should be able to do, if it was never designed with that idea that it could be revalued over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's another good news, bad news story, that we need to try and fix the input so that when things come to you, then you can do something with them rather than just having waste dumped on you.
100%. And it leads right into the next thing where, we're looking at new business models for this kind of thing, the local toxins, EPR, new economics. They're not in themselves, they're separate ideas, but they're intertwined. When we were just discussing them, even these 5 things, and there's multitudes of things that we discuss in our academy and beyond, right? When we're consulting with someone, that these things are not in silos, they're interconnected, and that will take new business models and new ways of creating to be able to look at things in this sort of larger aspect. So new business models are absolutely needed to work in this new circular economy way. The circular economy is not just about the product, it's also about the systems and the way that we create things, the way we create business, the way we create politics, the way that we physically move things to the next use, etc. So new business models are a huge part of this future. Anything else?
Right, I know we're running over time, but I
Yes.
just wanted to make a point about systems because you said such an important word.
Yes.
One of the problems with sustainability and the circular economy is that the mental models, the memes that we have to try and communicate them are now 40 years old for sustainability, and they're no longer as useful as they once were. This is one of my big bugaboos that I get on my high horse about whenever I get a chance. As you know, the problem with the 3 E's, for example, that everybody quotes, environment, equity, and economy, is that there's no system there. It's just 3 buckets. It's 3 topics. And so the idea behind that originally, when sustainability first came out in the corporate world, was just to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, you haven't to only look at the finances, you've got to also look at the impact on the environment and the impact on society. And so that was just really opening your mind to 3 topics that you need to pay attention to. But there's no system there. There's no system of environment equity and environment. And so you have to come back to a system. And that's what we do, Rachel, in our work. You know, I have my design like nature system, which says, how does nature become sustainable? And if you can follow nature's pattern and then do that inside a business, what's the equivalent in the business to how nature does things? Then you've got a system. So that's one of the things that we teach in our work.
Absolutely. And synergy with the way that the regenerative business strategists think is, how can we create business systems as if like nature, not just the product, but how we can actually use the idea of nature systems and work on that. And that's essentially where one of my projects was created from. So back to this project, how can you get involved with our work? Well, depending on where you are in your journey, what you're up to, you know, I didn't do a read of the room in terms of, you know, who's a CEO, who's a consultant, etc. But we have some great opportunities for you. If you want to get involved, to just read our book. It has a lot of great information in there. That is 15 English pounds. So you can go on to either Amazon, or I'll send a link off to you. And if you're in the UK, I can send you one of our UK print on demand ones. So that's that. Then we have our academy and alumni, which is an online course which you can join. But also has attached to it our alumni, which gives you then 12 months of conversations with Ken and I every month, and also with the wider alumni, who are a mixture of consultants, people inside businesses, as I said, designers, and also marketing professionals. And sometimes some seed businesses as well. So some businesses are bootstrapping, starting up, sometimes join our academy also, and we're very welcoming to them also. So
this is a community, right? It's both the training, and then it morphs into a community where you're working with people who've been through the same course, and
100%. And we
find all sorts of synergies within that community.
We have them come together. We sometimes collaborate if we have, as they've been through our academy. When we get consulting gigs in, then the idea is that we can invite those guys to work with us as well, because we've already created that community there as well. We also at the moment are inviting our alumni into our summit as VIP members as well. So if you bought the academy today or up to the end of May, then you can join our summit for part of the price. And we're also going to do some mastermind sessions on our trend radar, going into deeper aspects than we can do in half an hour. Then
so make a note on your calendar that June 21st, that's going to be an all-day summit.
100%.
On
so that is
sustainability,
virtual.
circularity.
That is virtual, so it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You can join our summits. Then we have our consulting and coaching, which can start from £10,000 to help businesses. Either we can do an academy for teams and train those teams inside of a business, or we can come in and do a bespoke consultation with your business. And that really depends on the scope of the project. We also offer speaking and workshops on request. So myself, I'm based in London in the UK, so I can easily get to the EU. And Ken is over in the States, as he said. So we do workshops in circularity, and then some of the we do a lot of sort of creative workshops in how to look at mindset as well, and that kind of thing. So it's really great for kind of HR teams who want to place this into their businesses as well. So thank you very much for watching. Have a look at realcircularity.com and I'll be in touch.